Back in 1982, this is the country home in South Salem where Robert and Kathie Durst live, and where investigators believe the real estate heir's wife took her last breath. In the nearly 40 years that have followed, the cold case has been the subject of 2 movies, 6 documentaries, and countless news stories. But before there were headlines, there was a marriage in deep turmoil and a family left in the dark.
Sooner or later, we're going to find out what happened to Kathleen Durst.
The pain never goes away.
She was smart, intelligent, lovable. She had an aura about her. She would walk down the street and everybody would just turn their heads.
I hate people that say, oh, I understand what you're going through. I hope you don't, because I would not wish this hell on anyone.
That's a picture of my sister, Kathie. She was the baby of the family.
Kathie was born June 15, 1952, on a steamy summer morning with temperatures soaring into the 90s.
She was the apple of my father's eye.
The youngest of Anne and James McCormick's 5 children.
Oh, this is Kathie in grammar school.
A straight-A standout student even in her earliest years at Notre Dame Elementary and later New Hyde Park Memorial High School.
She was a beauty. She had this inner glow.
She had a confidence about her that we all didn't have.
Old photographs
This was Kathie when she was a teenager, Sunken Meadow Park on Long Island.
capture a snapshot of their innocent childhood.
This is the family in Brooklyn, with Grandma's backyard.
But their picture-perfect lives would later burst.
You have to think about those good times, for sure, because the evil that came into our lives, we never saw coming.
Bobby had a violent temper.
Mayor says she did not feel safe.
Kathleen McCormick Durst disappeared from the couple's South Salem home.
She vanished, and no one has seen Kathleen Durst since.
At first, Robert and Kathie Durst's love story seemed like a fairy tale.
I thought they were in love.
It was 1971. 19-year-old Kathie had just graduated Western Connecticut State College and was working as a dental hygienist in Manhattan when the oldest son of one of New York's most powerful real estate moguls walked into her apartment lobby. Her sister, Virginia McKeon, remembers the day they met.
What did she tell you after she met Robert Durst?
Well, she liked him. She thought he was nice. He wasn't a warm, happy, jovial that we were kind of used to. Being brought up like that, you think everyone's like that, and then you find out they're not.
Kathie was so good looking and so intelligent and so vivacious that for Bob to be seen with her and go out with her, that was the arm candy that he wanted.
Kathie liked him, and that was the important thing. And then, of course, it turned into love.
On April 12, 1972, Kathie and Robert were married in a private ceremony at his father's home in Katona, with just 2 names on the guest list: his dad, Seymour Durst, and Kathie's mother, Anne.
It was like, well, nobody's invited.
Did that seem odd to
Oh,
you
yeah,
at the time?
yeah, definitely. We'd all had weddings and whatever. It wasn't the celebration that we thought it would be. You didn't question. I mean, that's just not the way we were.
But that type of secrecy became a hallmark of their relationship.
A lot of the stuff that Kathie was going through was kept to herself.
Almost like a shame, and I hate to use that word, you know, but you feel like I should be able to control this. I shouldn't let anybody do this to me.
By the early 80s, Kathie, then a student at Albert Einstein Medical School in the Bronx, starts telling her family she isn't happy in her marriage.
She was very, very drawn, very tired. She said, oh, I'm going to get a divorce.
Kathie's closest sister and best friend, Mary Hughes, to this day, nearly 40 years later, is still so traumatized by her loss, she cannot bring herself to go on camera.
You've never in 40 years done a television interview?
No.
No.
So she agreed to speak with us using just her voice.
She said, I'm going to leave him, but I can't leave him now. I said, well, yes, you can. You can stay with us. We'll pay you whatever. And that was it.
He couldn't handle that because he was losing control of the only person that he ever had control of for all those years.
At a family Christmas party in 1981, that need for control on full display.
Bob wanted to leave, and Kathie would say to Bob, please, Bob, I want to just visit a little bit more with the family. He walked over to her and grabbed her by the hair, the top of her hair like this, and yanked her, and she went with that pull. My grandmother's, her eyes were as big as pizza pies. She grabbed her coat, turns to me, it's okay, Jimmy. I mean, that's in my heart for the rest of my life. It's okay, Jimmy.
That was the last time Jim would see his youngest sister alive. 4 weeks later, on January 31st, 1982, on a cold, slushy evening in South Salem, New York, Kathie vanished into the night.
My mom called, and then I talked to my sister. Have you heard from Kathie? And I said, no, I haven't.
In the early days, I would drive down the highway, and I would literally pull over to the side of the road and cry. And I would cry and cry and cry.
Back then, Durst told NYPD detectives he dropped Kathie off at this train station in Katona and that she made it safely to their Manhattan apartment. He was never charged or publicly named a suspect, but Kathie's family thought he should have been.
And the moment the phone call came in, we both immediately said he killed her. We knew it. There should have been 10 detectives on it, but there wasn't. There was no pressure.
So Mary and her husband Tom dropped everything and took on the role of amateur detectives, ultimately deciding to search the couple's South Salem home since the NYPD hadn't.
Right here is the copy of the dig note. You found this in a trash can 2 months after her disappearance.
It was a small trash can by the bed. And I went in, picked it out, and there it was. I said, oh boy, it just sent chills down my spine.
The handwritten note contains the words town dump, bridge, dig, boat, and what Robert Durst has admitted was his own handwriting.
It sounded like a wish list of what you do with a body to me.
So what'd you do with this letter once you found it?
Gave it to the police. They didn't want it.
Didn't want it.
They did not want it.
But the most painful discovery was hiding in plain sight, right in their own home. Inside a knapsack, Kathie dropped off her safekeeping only 1 month before she disappeared.
What went through your mind the first time you read this journal?
I had a nervous breakdown.
Inside the faded and photocopied pages of this journal, read here for the first time by her sister Virginia, Kathie exposed buried secrets in her troubled marriage while considering a divorce.
This is the fall of '74. He told me how I should act. I disagreed, and he threw a half-gallon of water on my head while we were driving in the car. I felt humiliated and cried. He slapped me. March of '76, abortion, unplanned pregnancy. At the time, I felt hopeless, helpless, sick to my stomach. I was depressed and saw a psychiatrist 2 to 3 times after the abortion. Fall of '79, he punched me and I fell to the ground. In June of '80, air conditioner on the VW which I drive to school daily is broken. He refuses to fix it for $200.
In another entry, Kathie addresses her husband's rumored affair with Prudence Farrow, the youngest sister of actress Mia Farrow, an inspiration behind the Beatles' song Dear Prudence.
I continued school and in late May '76 found out Bob had an affair. Much trust had left our marriage by this time, but we still maintained a facade of a loving couple.
What kind of a toll do you think that took on her?
That would be devastating, I think, for any married person. That's a loss of trust. He felt he could do anything he wanted. You know, he was just above it all.
I see you rubbing the pages.
It was Kathie's words. And I don't have many of her words, so.
It was just shocking, hurtful. Explain more.
What was happening, stuff we didn't know.
And you can't bring her back. So I wanted my sister back.
The McCormick family would spend the next year living in fear.
I felt every day that we were under a serious threat of something happening, either from him or whoever. It was palpable fear, bordering on terror for a year.
Only in the case of Kathie's mother, Anne, that fear lasted decades.
Anytime I'd leave her house, Virginia, be careful. You be careful, don't talk to anybody. Don't open your door to anybody. To have that fear for your other children. And then she had the fear for herself. She would batten down her house in the hottest weather. She'd have all the windows closed, and she would have a step stool that she would put up against her door.
But Kathie's family says there is still one more chapter to write.
Look at the smile. Every time you look at her, she was smiling. That was Kathie.
Because while the book of Kathie's life will not have a happy ending,
I love you, Kathie.
they're praying it will have justice, so that when they see these pictures, they feel the closure, not the pain.
When I look at them, it's like looking through Kathie's eyes. It's so I didn't think I'd do that.
Still to come, a friend from Kathie's childhood resurfaces with a shocking secret.
Totally unexpected, beautiful night, no regrets.
But his life-changing encounter with Robert Durst's missing wife would have dramatic consequences.
He had a wad of cash rolled up and hit her right in the face with it.
Plus, we'll reveal Kathie and Robert Durst's surprising connection to the White House. Looking from the outside,
Every time you look at her, she was smiling.
it was a love story made for the movies. A working-class girl from a big Irish family
She was just full of life.
meets and marries the heir to a billion-dollar real estate fortune.
That's Bob Durst. I mean, it was always about Bob.
But you can't judge this book
Kathie suddenly disappeared.
by its cover. 4 decades later,
He almost got away with the whole thing.
buried secrets are exposed.
It's a smoking gun.
I feel like I'm the missing link in this case.
Kathie's childhood friend discloses details of an intimate encounter with her for the first time.
She grabbed my hand, led me back to the bedroom. We closed the door, and life changed for both of us.
But is it a motive for murder?
Somehow I feel that Kathie is looking down
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a seat.
and saying right now, I cannot believe that this story is finally going to be told.
Stand by. Camera set.
This is the first time you are revealing the true nature of your real relationship with Kathie Durst. Why are you sharing so much with me right now?
I feel like I'm the missing link in this case.
Bill Stevenson is a rock club owner from Delaware
Here's a picture of the group Queen and I.
who was married to First Lady Jill Biden in the 70s. But long before that, there was Kathie McCormick.
She was a wonderful person who really, truly cared about everybody around her. It never changed.
Bill and Kathie were playmates in the early 60s, enjoying summers along Lake Titiuscong in the Poconos.
It was always about water skiing, growing up on a lake, fishing, hanging out on the dock. We lived a short distance from each other. Mrs. McCormick liked to cook. It just seemed that's where we ate. Kathie was 3 or 4 years younger than me.
What snapshot do you have of her as a child?
She was like cool little sister where you'd look over and you'd laugh and she would say something funny. She was to be heard, not to be just seen. And as we went through our lives together, I watched her grow up to be a beautiful young woman.
Their friendship continued even after college when they went on to marry other people. People who would become household names. Jill Stevenson, now Jill Biden, became the First Lady of the United States. And Robert Durst, a true crime sensation. The 4 of them wound up under one roof in the summer of 1974 at the Stevensons' Delaware home.
Kathie and Jill were the same age. They were both students. Would you say that they hit it off right away?
Yes, Same personalities, both pursuing education. You know, it was hard not to hit it off. Both very smart. They're similar people at that age.
A stark contrast to Bill's connection with Robert.
There was never a word about money or how wealthy he was or who he came from. He was just a little off. He was more than a little shy. It was pretty hard with her outgoing personality and everything. Like, I often said to myself, what actually brought them together?
Do you remember a particular moment that made you think he was a little bit off?
I remember him talking to himself in my garage when I first met him. I will never forget it. Like, to me, it was like, oh my God.
He says the bigger shock would come a few years after. In a surprise phone call from Kathie.
She was extremely upset, and she said, I am having a real problem with Robert, and I'm scared to death. I need help. I can remember her saying that as clear as day. I need help. I have to get out of here.
Did she tell you why she was so scared?
Yes, she said that he was being violent with her.
And we unearthed the documents to prove it. We obtained Kathie's hospital records from the night she was treated for injuries consistent with domestic violence, less than a month before she died.
Why do you think she picked you to reach out to at that moment?
I think that at that point, she couldn't trust anybody around her that knew Robert, I guess. I don't know why she picked me, but I'm glad she did. But I do feel I let her down. You know, I look back at that last 2 months and I go, what could I have done differently? She asked for help and I let her down.
Between December of 1981 and January 1982, Bill, now divorced from Jill, says he visited Kathie at least 5 times in New York City to try and help her escape her troubled marriage. During one of those visits, he and his best friend George Kern stayed at Kathie's apartment, where he says his friendship with Kathie took an unexpected turn.
I felt like I was falling asleep. All of a sudden, I look over and I realized that she was in this silk nightie. Nothing was said. She grabbed my hand, led me back to the bedroom. We closed the door, and life changed for both of us. Totally unexpected, beautiful night, no regrets. The next thing I realize, we hear pounding on the door. It's like 7:30 in the morning, and I thought somebody was trying to break into the apartment. She runs out of the bedroom, she runs back in and she says, "It's Bob." I jumped up, I ran out. And then all of a sudden he screams something, but he goes like this. He had a wad of like cash rolled up and hit her right in the face with it. And it was so crazy. And he started yelling, "Kathleen, this isn't going to happen." And she started yelling, "I'm moving to Delaware. I'm done. We're done." And I'm like sitting there, I'm in shock. I was like so shocked over his rage. He was right in my face screaming 3 or 4 feet away from me that it's not going to happen.
He was right. It didn't happen. Kathie never made it to Delaware. She disappeared without a trace 10 days later. Bill has no doubt who's responsible.
I got in my car and went to the 19th precinct, literally within 24 hours, and said, he killed her. He's done something to her. He's got her. He wrote a couple things down. He goes, "All right, well, we'll get back to you." I never heard another word from them.
Do you think your intimate relationship with Kathie had anything to do with her disappearance?
Absolutely. I think it would have driven him crazy. I don't feel guilty about that. He was abusing her, and she wanted out. I do not regret that I went back into her bedroom with her. The minute I saw her standing there and grabbed my hand, that's all I could think about. If it led to him going off the deep end, I think at that point it was probably too late. But if it did, I'm glad it happened still. I don't regret it, not a second of it. And I feel like if something happened wonderful at the end of her life. I hope this was it. I'm sorry. I just hope that, she had the same thoughts at the end there.
According to Kathie's sister, Mary, she did.
What did Kathie confide in you about her relationship with Bill Stevens?
Just very nice, and she was very happy.
Do you think that Bill's story is a story that should be told in a courthouse?
Yes, obviously.
But it's not the only story that needs to be told. After Kathie first went missing, her husband waited 5 days before reporting her disappearance to police, who then filed this missing persons report. Durst hires an attorney a few days later. Then Kathie's family says all communication with him, along with the entire Durst family, abruptly stops.
They all knew what had happened to Kathie. The family and so many of his friends, nobody helped. Nobody even called my mom or, is there anything we can do? Have you heard any? Nothing. There was just such a lack of caring. They chose money and power over human decency. I don't understand that.
Eventually, the McCormick family hired their own lawyer, too, to fight for justice.
It is really horrible what my clients have gone through. The family has to endure all that. Their mother, who'd spent the last 3 decades of her life worried that Robert Durst was going to come and kill her and her other children. It's horrible. Nobody should have to live like that. They deserve peace. They deserve closure.
But Kathie's brother-in-law, Tom, believes the Durst family's outsized power and influence in New York is what initially kept Robert a free man.
How else? How else could you keep the police from not investigating a high-profile case of one of the richest people in New York?
Still to come, one man, 3 murders. Death and intrigue follow Robert Durst in the decades after his wife's disappearance.
Would come in, sit in the back of the bar by himself, dressed in drag.
She would have controlled Bob.
And another piece of the puzzle revealed. For the first time, Kathie's brother shares his shocking connection to Durst's murdered best friend.
She was very personable and warm. She had a smile that literally lit up the room.
A young medical student and real estate tycoon meet and fall in love. But evil was lurking underneath the surface of their picture-perfect marriage.
He was abusing her, and she wanted out.
She was terrified of Bob and knew that she felt he was going to kill her.
4 decades ago, Robert Durst told police he drove his wife Kathie from this South Salem home to the Katona train station bound for Manhattan. She was never seen or heard from again.
I can't even count how many conversations we had. If anything ever happens to me, don't let Bobby get away with it.
A cloud of suspicion surrounding Durst ever since as another grisly crime plays out on the West Coast.
Did you kill Susan Berman?
No.
Durst's best friend turns up dead at her Los Angeles home with a single gunshot wound to her head, sparking a second headline-grabbing murder mystery. Who silenced Susan Berman?
The two of them, once they were together, it was like, basically they had their own conversation.
Robert Durst and Susan Berman were fast friends from grad school at UCLA in the 70s, bonding over their similar childhoods. They both had mothers who died of apparent suicides.
I saw her on the road.
And very powerful fathers. Susan's dad was Dave Berman, the right-hand man of legendary mobster Bugsy Siegel.
She lived like a little princess her whole life.
And Robert, like a prince, born into a world of extreme wealth, power, and privilege, with Seymour Durst as a father. Robert's former brother-in-law, Jim McCormick, remembers going on double dates with them back in the 1970s.
They were double dates, Kathie and Bob, Jim and Susan on the west side of Manhattan. And quite frankly, Susan was like Bob. It was all about Susan. Talk, talk, talk. And I was like a fly on the wall. Kathie said to me, "What do you think?" I go, "I don't think so." I hate to use the word, she was insufferable.
While Jim and Susan were not a love match, Susan and Robert's friendship endured.
I would say the relationship between Susan and Robert would be that Susan was more the aggressor more the connector. She would initiate connecting with Bob. She protected him, the two of them. You know, once they were together, it was like, you know, basically they had their own conversation.
But their inseparable bond would be put to the ultimate test after a law enforcement officer in Westchester reopened the case into Kathie Durst's disappearance back in 1999 after receiving a tip from a suspect in a non-related public lewdness case.
When I met with him, he stated that there was a murder that occurred in South Salem in 1982, and that an individual named Robert Durst killed his wife, Kathie Durst.
This piqued your interest in the case?
It did.
New York State Police investigator Joseph Becerra recently testified about his time spent as the lead investigator in the case.
In 1999. Had you ever heard the name Susan Berman before?
Prior to the opening of the investigation?
Yes.
No.
At some point during your investigation, did you hear her name?
Yes, I did.
In what context?
Mostly friends of Kathie's who said that she was very close with Bob Durst and that she should be someone that we definitely interview because they were extremely close at the time of Kathie's disappearance.
Did you plan on interviewing Susan Berman?
I did.
When were you planning on speaking to Susan Berman?
Probably at some point going into the new year.
But Becerra never got the chance. Susan died of a gunshot to her head inside her Los Angeles home, December 23, 2000.
Who killed Susan Berman?
Susan Berman was killed execution style,
Shot to death on Christmas Eve.
Jim McCormick, who sits in the unique position of being the brother-in-law of the murder suspect and the former date of the murder victim, has no doubt who pulled the trigger.
Bob was afraid that Susan Berman was going to implicate him in the death of Kathie. Susan knew exactly what happened to my baby sister.
How do you know?
I knew that Susan had enough influence of Bob that she would have extracted it from him in those first days and weeks and months after Kathie allegedly disappeared.
9 months after Susan's murder and less than 3 weeks after New York City was brought to its knees in a brazen act of terrorism, Durst made front-page headlines once again after a gruesome discovery in the Galveston Bay.
We believe the head's going to be in this area over here.
A Texas fisherman found a headless torso floating in a trash bag along with a receipt that leads police to the front doorstep of a $300 a month apartment rented by a mute woman with no shortage of buried secrets.
He's been in here.
Investigators quickly found out that she was a he, using the name of an old Scarsdale classmate, Dorothy Siner, who had been frequenting a popular transvestite show in Galveston for months.
He's come in, sit in the back of the bar by himself, dressed in drag.
The remains? Robert Durst's elderly neighbor, Morris Black.
Cops eventually found everything but Morris Black's head.
This graphic and detailed autopsy report shows he was severely beaten before he, too, was shot to death.
Maybe Morris could not be trusted any longer.
Durst was arrested and quickly posted a $300,000 bail before skipping town.
The murder suspect disappeared back in October.
Jumping bail in Texas and a nationwide manhunt.
His life on the run ending 45 days later on November 30th, 2001, after a shoplifting incident at this Wegmans outside Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Store surveillance tape shows Durst completely bald, with even his eyebrows shaved off, stealing a sandwich and single Band-Aid, even though he had $37,000 stashed in his car outside, a car rented in Morris Black's name weeks after his death. Durst was sent back to Texas to face justice. Still to come, a surprise verdict in the Lone Star State.
Black sit there for the next 3 hours holding a gun like this? No way.
And then, a stranger-than-fiction trial in California.
Yes, I've been charged with murder in the past.
He will bold-faced lie.
But it could be a jury here in New York that gets the final say. A New York socialite, a mobster's daughter from Southern California, and a struggling senior in Texas down on his luck. 3 people with no obvious connection, but one man.
I just couldn't handle the situation.
Privileged real estate heir Robert Durst. His first suspected victim, his own wife, Kathie.
Bob Durst killed my sister.
Murdered in an alleged fit of jealous rage over her desire to end their crumbling marriage.
She wanted out.
2 decades later, Robert Durst would have his first brush with justice inside a Texas courtroom, admitting to killing and dismembering his neighbor, Morris Black. Late 2003, Galveston. A 6-week trial.
Ready to proceed?
Made for TV.
Objection.
A first-degree murder case hailed as clear-cut by detectives.
It's clear he was not cut up with an axe.
With Robert Durst using a bow saw to cut off Morris Black's arms, legs, and head.
He's fairly skilled with guns, knives, and saws.
Durst testified he killed him in self-defense after a fight between the 2 neighbors got out of hand.
Morris Black started to point at you, and you grabbed him like that.
And the jury believed him. Even Durst himself was shocked after 5 days of deliberations ended with an acquittal.
With the jury, find the defendant, Robert Durst, not guilty.
20 years later, battling cancer, Durst stands trial again, this time in California, charged with a single count of murder in the death of his best friend, Susan Berman.
Did you kill Susan Berman?
No.
40 years since Kathie's disappearance, the real estate baron's relationship with his first wife takes center stage. Durst says they were madly in love from day one.
She was pretty and interesting. We could talk for a long time. We were both very much in love.
A committed union, but not a faithful one. Under oath, Durst also admitted to having a years-long extramarital affair with actress Mia Farrow's younger sister, Prudence Farrow.
Prudence and I were having a relationship, and we were sleeping together. We were dating before Kathie disappeared, and we were dating after Kathie disappeared.
One man, 3 murder mysteries. Kathie's friends believe Durst was capable of them all.
She felt he was going to kill her.
Bobby Durst murdered her.
Robert's brother Douglas Durst thought he was the next target.
Were you afraid of your brother?
Yes, I was.
He even showed up at the California trial with his own security detail.
Why did you hire security? What was the reason for that?
Because I have fear that my brother has threatened to kill me, and I have fear that he may have the means to do so.
Douglas explained the problems with his older brother date back to their early childhood years.
He treated me miserably, fight with me every chance. He would embarrass me at every opportunity, and it was a very difficult relationship.
Decades of tension came to a head when Robert was accused of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from the family business. Accusations exposed by his then-wife, Kathie. A court motion dated back in April of 2021 outlines one of the prosecutor's theories that her determination to expose him ultimately led to a motive for murder.
Did Kathie ever mention you anything about Bob stealing from the Durst organization?
Yes.
When did this happen?
In Christmas 1980.
A multi-billion-dollar empire Robert was set to inherit, but the chairman's role is now held by his younger brother, Douglas.
At some point after Morris Black's death, did you and your brother become involved in the Durst organization, your family, in a contested legal dispute?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that this would highly acrimonious be an exaggeration?
It would not be an exaggeration.
And as a result of this litigation, was there eventually a settlement where your brother Bob was paid tens of millions of dollars and basically bought out of any of the family business, any of the trusts?
That is correct.
Kathie's family believes Douglas helped cover up his brother's heinous crime to avoid negative attention on the family.
There's rules for the rich and rules for other people.
They were big in politics and stuff. I mean, in those days, and the press stopped talking about it. Everybody just dropped it.
An allegation the Durst organization has denied. As for Robert Durst, he has never admitted publicly to stealing from his family, but what he did admit on the stand was that witnessing his mother's apparent suicide at their Scarsdale mansion as a 7-year-old child sent him down a path of mental illness.
My grandfather came into my bedroom and woke me up, walked me out into the hall, and said, "Look, Bobby, there's Mommy on the roof." I waved at Mommy on the roof. I heard my father yell, "Call the fire department." I saw my mother on the driveway, on the cobblestones, in her nightgown. They say she died instantly. I started running away. Every couple of weeks, my father couldn't handle me, and he kept sending me to see psychiatrists.
Did that childhood trauma lead him to commit murder?
On 3 occasions, you can say that. I think he's more of a killer who's out to protect Bob Durst. It was always about Bob. He was the center of the universe, his universe. And if you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he discovered that you are a danger to him, then you're gone.
While Durst is on trial in LA, in New York,
a whole community wants and needs closure.
The Westchester District Attorney reopened the 40-year-old cold case in early 2021, investigating Kathie's disappearance as a murder.
But it's like, almost like a relief almost, you know, maybe something will happen this time.
What would it mean for your family if charges were eventually brought against him here in New York?
Then there would be some justice system that we could believe in again, maybe. I wish my mom had seen it, but, you know, it's all just such a waste.
Now the justice system is up against the clock if this dying man of privilege, already accused of 3 murders, is to be tried for the one so many believe was his first, the disappearance of Kathie Durst. State police investigator Joseph Becerra, who first opened the case in Westchester back in 1999, thinks he knows where she's been for the last 40 years.
Does this map fairly and accurately depict where the Pine Barrens is located, where it says Beach Haven, New Jersey, in relation to South Salem?
Yes, it does.
What is the Pine Barrens like, that area?
Pine Barrens is this vast area, hundreds of thousands of acres of pine trees and sand.
Becerra believes Durst killed his wife Kathie in South Salem and then buried her body in the secluded Pine Barrens, a notorious dumping ground for mobsters going back to the 60s. It's a theory based on Durst's seemingly odd behavior in the days after she disappeared. Becerra says the very morning after she vanished, on February 1st, 1982, he visited a Ridgefield, Connecticut store that sold tarps, ropes, and strong cleaning products.
How far is the Caldor store in Ridgefield, Connecticut from South Salem?
Probably 20-minute ride.
Becerra then explained to the jury that collect phone call records place Robert Durst near the Pine Barrens 36 hours after she went missing.
Where, in relation to this pine forested wilderness area, these calls came from? How far?
The drive to the Pine Barrens is 10 to 15 minutes. It wasn't long.
When you get to the Pine Barrens, what type of roads are we talking about?
I mean, just off one of the main roads, we counted probably well over a dozen dirt roads right off of it that just basically go to nowhere.
And how isolated is this area?
Very isolated.
If someone wanted to go somewhere and not be seen, how easy would it be?
Just turn in any of those dirt roads.
Where is Kathie now?
Right here. She's in our heart, in my heart.
A sister's love, stronger than ever.
And that's where she's staying.
Unwilling to abandon hope, but still searching for justice 40 years later. This is Buried Secrets. I'm Tara Rosenblum.